Can you see me now? I'm digging your
Hey,
hat.
that's a nice shirt. Did you do that shirt, Ty?
I did do that. Well, I did the drawing on the shirt, but the actual emblem itself, that's from King Tutankhamun's tomb. It's something that he wore. It wasn't this big, of course. It was probably only about yay big, and it was a pendant. And I don't know. When I saw it, I was sure there was something going on there. And it's actually two versions of it. One version does the perimeter circumference squaring the circle, which would be what you would look at when you look at the Great Pyramid. That's following that pattern. And the one that I'm wearing, this is the area model. So it's a more squished, more oblate rather than it being bigger. It's narrower. But in either case, so they got one of each. So interestingly enough, they're playing both sides of that coin, which is pretty cool. I like Kevin. I loved his little.
I thought you might enjoy that.
Yeah, I really did. I really did. And you know, and he's right as far as they are everywhere. And as far as reactivating the entire grid, that might be a little challenging, as he was saying.
Yeah, well, I was.
Wow. So is this how far along he is in putting this together so far, or has he gotten even farther since these pictures?
This has been 16 years in the making. This
Holy
major stone right here in the center. It's 2 tons.
Oh.
And
look at all that polygonal geometry he's got going on in there.
Yeah,
it's got all the different niche spaces where they overlap and blend in. Obviously, from a strength point of view, brilliant.
Yeah,
but it's cool that he's actually doing it like the ancients did. I love it. All these places where you saw these keyholes, and of course, and some of them were wells. And other types of architectural stuff. I think one was in Japan. Anyways, I just took my camera and I just started, on my phone, and they would come up. I'd take a picture of one, and then I'd take a. Well, as it turns out, most of them actually play the same geometric harmonic, the very same. What I call the ben-ben. The ben-ben is basically an isosceles triangle. So it's like this, kind of tall, and it's the precursor to the pyramidal form. Well, it turns out that the one that actually marks where the Great Pyramid is on the Giza Plateau is the primary pattern that these keyholes are following. So I find it interesting that he had that spontaneous experience about potentially opening something up, or several of them up. And I think that's part of what, by having people actually see, I mean, it is pretty spectacular when you really see the full Giza Plateau and what they did there, regardless of who you believe did it. I mean, if it was someone from way in the past, or if it was just the Egyptians themselves. It still is quite a beautiful arrangement of patterns that is one of the things, of course, we'll be looking at. And ultimately, if that, and having an understanding that allows us to essentially plug into some of these other fields, it may in fact actually act as a kind of a primer to activate other things around the world. Because as more and more people connect in and actually connect to the actual fields that were set up, that's kind of what I mean, and that's what that whole 100th monkey, concept of, once you get enough people dialed into the same thing, it becomes almost something that everybody has an opportunity to plug, to actually grok and connect to. And that's really kind of, that's the big hope for me, as far as putting this information out at this point, is to get that dialed in a way that everybody kind of accesses or has access to it. without having a bunch of restrictions around dogmas and things like that. I will be talking, though, of course, about how I see the Egyptians and their portrayal of what it meant to them. And you know, most people go, well, why did they stop building pyramids? It's like, well, because they finished what they needed to for the requirement of creating this larger global. You know, what I talk about is, you know, you can draw the drawing, and the drawing is, you know, maybe it's only this big, you know, it's small. And you can blow it up on your computer, or you put it on your TV, you can make it bigger and that kind of thing. But when you blow it up to a global frame, then you're talking about a harmonic that's really actually connected directly to the earth. And from my point of view, understanding that opens something up in consciousness, that it's not that it's closed, it's just if you're not aware of something and your attention's not on it, then you're just not plugged in. It's sitting right there, and everybody that recognizes it or already knows about it may have access to it. But for those of us that, you know, busy in their lives, not really thinking about it, you know, kind of a weekend warrior when it comes to spirituality and discovering new things, this gives them an opportunity actually to go quite a bit deeper really fast.
That's something that I want to key in on for people who would attend your seminar or the live stream, is that this is really about visual geometry in juxtaposition to analytical geometry, which involves high math and solving problems and things like that, whereas visual geometry is more identifying patterns.
Right,
And
patterns that are repeating, patterns that are seen in nature around them, and yet because they've recognized these patterns and the beauty around them, they are also then discovering kind of the beginnings of how these patterns relate to each other, where, you know, maybe, you know, you like, you know, just our eye, the eye is where the circle really comes from. And I think that's why the Eye of Horus is such an iconic concept in Egypt, is because, you know, when a child is born, you know, the mother, the father, I mean, they're just looking right into their child's eyes, and the child is looking right back up into them. And what are they looking at? You know, they're looking right into the window of their own parents' souls, you know, and plugging in a really innately powerful way. And so that's what I see in relation to what Egypt's culture was attempting to accomplish, was to essentially recognize how powerful that is, and then utilize that to understand nature around them.
for people who
Yeah.
are considering and wanting to join this seminar, in essence, what I like about it is it's kind of a shortcut from the math, because if you can see patterns and the art in it and the symmetry in it, that kind of can get you there faster than the math. And then, you know, you'd use the math to prove your work.
The way I think about what visual geometry does is it's really a way to bring our attention and our focus into a space that's much more easily felt. It's hard to feel hard math. It's hard, you know what I mean? It's really hard to plug into hard math because it's so left-brained, really. And where when you look at art, I mean, all the Renaissance artists were using geometry in the layout of their artwork because they recognize that our subconscious can see that. And what's amazing is actually not all temple sites, not all gates are specifically designed to measure the earth. But some are, and in Egypt, especially on the Giza Plateau, absolutely. So it is a true model of geometry, which is, of course, the measure of the earth. It really, they nailed it. And what's so awesome, one of the, you just plugged in, Alberto, but I was sharing with Robert that it's beautiful what they did. You know, when you look at it today, because you're looking at something, you know, 4,500 years or more, depending on how far back people want to push that knowledge stream. But it must have just looked absolutely spectacular back then. Even if you didn't know exactly everything that was going on there. You know, of course, we can make mathematical models, we can create 3D animations to kind of try to bring that back. But even then, the actual geometry of it all, I think, looks even more profound and more beautiful. And that's what visual geometry does, is it really has the capacity to touch us in a much deeper way. And I mean, and not just touch our brain, you know, but touch our hearts and our emotions, which is, you know, I mean, from my point of view, the heart is the seat of intention and the seat of the soul, which is why the Egyptians would say at the end of your life, you know, you passed all the tests, they weighed your heart against the feather of Ma'at. And if your heart was lighter, they're saying then your soul and your intention was so pure that you can pass through the gate and go into another space, a higher space.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah. When it comes to the Mayas, one of the works we've done here is discovering the geodetic standard measuring unit. And it turns out to be two major rulers that both of them contain 9 different measuring units. All of them are fractals to planet Earth. And we have performed over 10,000 measurements in field work in different buildings in Maya. And man, these guys were so accurate. We don't have to allow more than 1.5 or 2% error, most of the time attributable to the intervention of modern men by the time of rebuilding the Mayan temples. They were so accurate in every single thing, whether it was a small bead for color or a gigantic pyramid, everything was made after that geodetic measuring system.
If you look at the reality as being holographic, then, you know, there is real no separation. Time is kind of an illusion, even space is, you know. So technically, you know, if we really wanted to understand anything, we could just, you know, go inside and plug right into what's already sitting right there in front of us all around the world. And so, you know, whether or not, like I said, Egypt is 12,000 years old, whether or not it's 5,000 years old, it really doesn't matter at some point. It just really matters that they discovered and put the energy and effort in to create something that is meaningful and that can last, you know, throughout the ages. As far as just kind of getting back, so we just kind of finished everything up with Robert around talking about this real difference between the visual component, which touches us at a much deeper level, versus an analytical component that really is accessing just kind of a higher brain center, but it's not necessarily touching the heart. And so it makes it much easier for people to kind of get more, it seems as though they get a little more, it's not about being judgmental or anything like that, but they have less empathy for how other people are processing their experience. Because it's like, no, it's just like this, boom, it's just, and that's it. Whereas with art, even when it's geometric art, it opens up a pathway that a lot of people can appreciate simultaneously, whether they actually understand the math or not. And that's why I believe that, at least in the case of Egypt, and what I'll be revealing is that even in the smallest, like you said, you know, little 2-inch, you know, it was made out of ivory, it's got a little carving on it. And yet when you look at the proportions of they're little rectangles. It's got the king's name. I mean, it's the same as, you know, this megalithic structure where that same triangle is, you know, maybe 2.5 miles at its base and, you know, 4 miles tall. And yet it's still the same ratio. To me is much more powerful than looking at things through numbers and the symbol sets that go with numbers, like, you know, the symbol for pi, because, you know, these are all their symbols. You know, pi is supposed to be a transcendental number, means it goes on forever. But technically, from an actual use point of view, we don't use it like that. Scientists don't even use it like that, because there's no, I mean, you could use a quantum computer, but it would just keep going forever. You have to actually stop somewhere. And so it just comes down to what you're trying to accomplish. And based on what you're trying to accomplish, well, how much of that pi do you really need to know? And that's something that I think people kind of, they just see the symbol and think, oh yeah, it's this infinite thing. It's like, well, not in practicality, it's not.
Yeah, you only need 360 degrees, that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't need more than that.
No, exactly. I'm quite excited about being able to bring all of this out. We're going to look forward to your response, Alberto, when you see just the elegance that the Egyptians were able to do. And of course, like I said, I'm completely open to the potential that it's not the Egyptians, but you know, you kind of have to, if you're taking into account radiocarbon dating and things like that, it's really hard not to give them credit for it. I don't know how to separate out the Sphinx by itself, because it's so coherently attuned to both the forward and side temple that's in front of it, and to the side of it, and to the second pyramid, which of course most alternative theorists say, well, the Egyptians did build that. They built that pyramid. They didn't build the Great Pyramid, but they built that one and the third pyramid. And they built all the small stuff, but just not the Sphinx and just not the Great Pyramid. And it's sort of like, well, when you see the mathematics behind it, I just don't know how you can separate those out. When I was in Pensacola, I was wearing, you know, I brought 3 different shirts with me. The Min palette was one of them that I was wearing. And I'm in the hotel, and in 3 different instances, and it was all women from, I would say, age like late 20s to early 60s. And every single one of them had a real visceral response when they looked at my shirt, not, you know, looking at the drawing on my shirt. And when I began to talk with them, what I discovered was that they had feelings about certain things, but they didn't know how to voice those feelings. They were listening to people talking about different kinds of geometries and that, but it wasn't completely resonating with them. But they didn't really have any way to express that. You know, their friends are into it. You know, everybody's following this particular person or this particular teaching or this particular pathway. And they knew, it's like, well, I mean, it's getting close, you know, but they just felt like there was something, and somehow this touched them in a really deep way. And it resonated. And when I would talk about it, they were like, that's what I thought, you know, and it was all of a sudden what they were kind of holding back, because, you know, no one wants to be embarrassed or sound like they're the know-it-all or whatever. And so I really feel like we're at this spot in time where people have enough of an understanding that they're ready to go a little deeper. They're ready to have a little bit of a greater grounded understanding, and they want it. Art has that capacity to actually allow us to touch the divine in a way that's so it's just so visceral versus heady, but you know, if you're building, physical spaceships, obviously you have to know a lot of engineering. But if you're creating a Merkaba field around your own self, maybe you don't really need any of that, because it's by your intention and it's by your attention. So those two things, I think, give you access to spaces that allow you to bypass some of these greater, technological understandings. And ultimately, I think that's where we will all, we're born naked. We let go of the body at the end. We're not building, spaceships to go to the next dimension typically, unless for whatever reason there seems to be some, purpose for that. But why do that if you can just create your own field and go without it? That's, to me, the easiest way to travel the universe. That's how I really believe that any of the ascended masters, any beings that really are in higher states of consciousness, the easiest way to go from one planet to another, especially if it's in another star system, is just let go of the physical body, travel there, and then pick up a new one. Way easier. Why build a machine that's going to take you forever to get there? You might kill all your passengers because you went crazy before you ever get there.
Yeah. Before we close it out, I want to, let you go back to freelance with Alberto, because you were also saying yesterday that you were just kind of giving some brief overview of Chichen Itza. And
yeah,
I was thinking of we're thinking of doing a trip down to Alberto, and I think it would be cool to take this knowledge that you're talking about with the visual geometry and see if we can do something with Alberto down in the Yucatan and see if there's find the overlays.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Maya calendar, especially Solkian, is related to DNA. The secret of life is actually hidden in it. And the reason why these constructions, the Toltecs, which are the ones that built Teotihuacan, are the ancient Mayas. They are exactly the same ones. They built those buildings, and we know today that it's called asymmetrics, and they meant to be asymmetrics.
Oh,
Because yeah, it's not an error. If you see a plant view from the top, you will see that, for instance, but two of the sides of a pyramid are perfectly parallel, but then the other two sides are slightly closed from the other.
That's what I noticed.
Because they
on purpose is what you're saying.
It's on purpose, yeah. Because it's called asymmetrias, asymmetrics. Because they know that solstitious in the winter is not the same as solstitious in spring, in summer.
I understand.
Because of the path of the sun. You've seen the sun when you dot it every day during a whole year. It provides you with the shape of an 8. But
Yes.
that 8 has got two vesicas, and one is a little bit bigger than the other one. Right? So that is what you are being considered when it comes to be a scope, which is fixed horizons. The building has to be slightly bent in so that it matches the dates on those days. With the equinoxes, you have no problem because it's equal, but solstitious consider the differences. And here in Merida, we're about 10 miles away from here. You got Chaltún. And we have got the perfect example for that. And it can be proven at nights how different dates on the solstitices you can perfectly use the side doors and the angles of these lower frizzos as fixed horizons. And then you see how it perfectly matches the appearance of Venus or Mars, and how the sun also comes out early in the morning or sets in the evening. But it was meant to be. It's not an error.
No, I didn't feel that it was an error. I knew that the Greeks did that, but I wasn't. But it makes perfect sense because really the Maya were really they were time travelers. It was about time, in my mind.
When you guys come to Yucatan, we are going to take you into this machine that has been built. talking about these trips you're talking about.
Yeah, I would like
You
that.
would be amazed what we're working with now. I wouldn't dare to speak of it now on air, but when you guys come down here, you're gonna be amazed. It's a promise.
Okay.
It'll be a pleasure and an honor to have both of you down here.
Right on. Right on. Well, Robert, obviously we're gonna have to talk a little bit more to find out what your intentions are as far as when on the calendar. All right, thank you again, Robert, for hooking us up. This will be the last, obviously, before the big presentation and reveal, which is going to be a blast. It's the perfect destination, being in Sedona. It amplifies everything, so that should make it really easy to push the information right out around the whole world, and start building off of that and moving to the next adventure afterwards.
Well, it's been great talking to you guys.
Yes, likewise. We'll do it again.